today or the PowerPoint slides, please just send me an email. We'll get you those PowerPoint slides right away. And then the recording as soon as we have it available. So don't hesitate to reach out if you would like either of those. And we'll go ahead and give it just another minute to make sure that everybody can get logged in before we take off. All right, it is 9 o'clock, so the goal is to get you guys out of here in less than an hour. I think we averaged about 45 minutes yesterday, so I would expect we would probably take about that long today. Thank you again for joining us. Before we start off with just introductions from the United Way team, just because I know many of you met some of us in your due diligence meetings, but this is really a chance that we've got everybody online. We want to make sure you know all the faces and all the names. I do want to send a quick poll out, just seeing who's had a chance to review the application guide or not. This will really help me know how in depth I need to go into that application guide as we're meeting today. So I'm going to send this out now. If you can go ahead and just take that really quick, that will be helpful for me. So thank you. All right, it looks like we've got a few responses. I'll let everybody else continue to kind of input as they come in. But in the interest of time, we'll just start off with some introductions from our team. So for those of you that I haven't met, I think I've met just about everybody on the call, but I'm Meg Blue. I'm our Director for Community Investments here at United Way. And I will go ahead and have Allie introduce herself, and then she can kind of kick it off to the next member of our team.
Good morning. I am Allie Willett. I'm a Community Investment Manager here at United Way, overseeing our financial stability and education portfolios. And I will go ahead and pass it on to Lauren this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Lauren Kimball, I'm the Assistant Vice President for our team, and just really get to support the team as we walk through another round of this process. They are really your front lines, especially Allie, Tiffany, and Meg as your agency liaison. So I just want to encourage you to leverage their expertise as you walk through this process. Check in with them and ask any questions that you may have. We're trying to make sure that we give you all the resources that we can to give you the opportunity to make the most compelling case for the volunteers that are reviewing your applications. But hopefully you find this morning helpful. Feel free to share feedback. And like I said, use those agency liaisons. They're available as your resource. Tiffany, I see you join in, so I'm going to pass to you.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, I'm a minute tardy. My name is Tiffany Howard. I'm the Community Investments Manager. I specifically oversee our basic needs portfolio. So many of you are probably familiar with me. I'm excited to have you guys here this morning. Thank you for being here. We're excited about going into this new application. So thank you for being here.
I think our last member of the team is Jonathan. I'll let him introduce himself. Hopefully it works. Yesterday his mic wasn't working, so we're going to give him a shot.
All right, how we sounding?
We got you, yeah.
All right. Puts me a little bit at ease this morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jonathan Crossley, and my role here at United Way is the community liaison. And so I will be putting my email and contact information in our chat. And so please, if there are opportunities for us to, attend events, opportunities in order to, partner together, I would definitely like to be involved with that. And so please feel free to reach out to me. Looking forward to working with you.
All right. Thank you, Jonathan. So we'll go ahead and kind of dive in. Like I said, we're recording this session. So if you want a copy of the recording after, please reach out. It might take a couple of days. So just bear with us there, but we will get that to you. Also, if you want a copy of the slides, we will be happy to send that to you as well. So please just send me an email. Really today, we're just kind of going to do a little recap of where we're at right now, how we got to where we are today, go over a few key things that we really want to highlight as it relates to your application. And then we'll kind of pull down the presentation and jump into WiseHive. So you can see what that application will look like. We'll walk you through that, as well as some specifics from the application guide that we really want to point out for you. So again, we shouldn't monopolize too much of your time today, but want to set you guys up as best we can to submit a competitive and compelling application. So we'll just kind of dive in an overview of where we are at right now. I'm sorry, I should also add, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Our team will be answering as we go. So if anything comes up, please feel free to put those in there. I'll also pause throughout the presentation to answer anything as well. So don't hesitate if anything comes to your mind and you want to ask it. We want to be available to answer those questions for you. So now diving into kind of that process outline, as you all know, the month of October, those letters of intent were due. We did receive over about 220 of those. So we were able to review and assess those letters of intent, and then move into those due diligence meetings that all of you and your teams participated in throughout either the months of November and December. Between all of the agencies, we held just over 120 of those meetings. More programs than that, but we met with 120 agencies between that time period of November to December to then determine who would come to this step of the process and moving forward with the application. So we're here in January. We'll go over a timeline for what comes next a little later. But really those applications will open on January 8th at 8 a.m. and will close January 31st at 5 p.m. From there, we'll go into our staff and volunteer review with award announcements and grant agreements being made in May and June. So just a quick kind of little snapshot of how we got to where we are today and where we intend to go from here. So I think some key messages that I kind of covered a little bit in the last slide is just we received a record volume of letters of intent, and we really expect a highly competitive application and review process. And we anticipate that requests will outpace the number that we have available to invest. So we really want to encourage you in your applications to highlight the urgency of need, disparity, and why your program is essential for our community safety net. And I think it should be noted, not every letter of intent that was submitted was offered a due diligence meeting. Not everyone who had a due diligence meeting was invited to move forward with an application, and not everyone who submits an application will be awarded funding. So this is really a time to make that compelling case for why your program is so necessary for the community, and to really speak to our volunteers about why your program is needed and why United Way should back it for funding. So as a reminder, in your applications, you're not only speaking to the United Way team who might know your programming and the work you're doing, you're speaking to community volunteers. So what our volunteers are really looking for is that United Way alignment, ensuring that you're addressing clear social and economic disparity through your programming. They're going to want to make sure that your program delivery is unique and that you are touching a critical target population, that your program is reflective of the community, and that they have a clear understanding of your target population, that there is an unmet and compelling need, and this is not a duplicated programming in the community. So what makes your programming stand out above all others? With the budget, making sure that it's a realistic budget with a realistic request for funding. And we'll also be assessing your financials to ensure that they are stable and that this is an efficient use of funds. And then your ability to record your results and your capacity to report. They'll be really looking at that, our priority funding areas and our requirements for what are necessary to report out on. And they'll be trying to gather from your application information that lets them know that you will be able to report out on those metrics that might be required for that area of funding that you're applying for. So again, why is this program the best use of donor funds, and why is the program essential to our community? I think are all things to highlight. So again, making sure that you're going through this and using this as your thought process when you're completing and filling out that application. So just some tips for a successful application, using clear language and ensuring that you're using section headers if necessary, if you're jumping to a different aspect of your programming or a different service that's offered in your programming, so that volunteers can really get a clear picture of what you're offering and they can get a true understanding of how and why you're doing what you're doing. Being very clear about the services that your program offers. I think we had this conversation a few times throughout due diligence meetings, but making sure as United Way funds programs that aspects of your programming are encompassed as services that are offered through that program and making that clear to volunteers. Ensuring that you're incorporating equity throughout your application, and sharing your results. So services and outcomes, and proving your ability to measure and track what you say your program does. We'll touch on this a little later, but program attendance does not necessarily, consist of an outcome. So really looking at what are individuals learning, what are they taking away, how do you know that their circumstance has improved by participating in your programming and being able to speak to that. Being consistent throughout your application and not over-promising. So I think really looking at anticipated numbers served. Is this realistic for what our program will be able to do throughout the next year? And just making sure that that aligns and matches up with what you truly know and believe your program can do. And then using the application guide as a tool and a resource. It is about 15 pages and it is in depth, but it truly will walk you through every question and what we're looking for and really help you frame it. So again, use that application guide and use us as a resource as you're completing that application. And the final plugin here is just, we love technology. I love ChatGPT. I was using it this morning, but just be careful to avoid kind of long-winded responses that don't necessarily say as much about your program as you might want a volunteer to understand. I think the more clear and concise you can be in explaining your program and the services that you're offering, the better. So really avoiding long answers that don't necessarily say a lot, and getting down to kind of the roots and the meat of what your program does and why it does it. So again, in the application, you will have an option to kind of select your primary funding area. We have our 3 funding areas of basic needs, education, and financial stability. So you'll see on this slide kind of a breakdown of those 3 sectors. You'll be offered an opportunity to select kind of your first priority funding area and then a second one as well. And I would make sure in selecting these that these are, areas that you'll be able to report out on. So say you're selecting basic needs and shelter programming, then you're going to want to be able to report out on how many shelter nights you're able to provide throughout a year. Or if you're a financial stability program and your metric is underemployment, you're going to want to report out on how many jobs you've been able to provide through your programming. So within the application, you'll have a link to our priority funding matrix, which will detail all of these out and what is required to be reported on. So please use that as a guide as you're selecting those metric areas. And again, feel free to reach out to us as you're going through. And then the last slide we have to go over, and then we'll pause to see if there's any chat questions or anything before we jump into Wise Ties, is just some FAQs. So you will be required to submit an audit in your application. This should be your most recent audit. Any organization over 500,000 plus should have an audit. If you do not have an audit, you can apply with board-approved financial statements. But again, our team, ourselves, and our finance team will be assessing risk in terms of finances. So This could increase risk assessed, and we will likely be reaching out to you just to get further clarification of any questions we might have if you're not able to provide that audit. So if you don't have a most recent audit, that doesn't inhibit you from applying. Just know that we may have further questions if you're not able to provide that, and you do need to provide board-approved financial statements. Making sure that when you're covering your use of funds, and we will have a narrative in our budget section, so really being able to describe where those funds are going and what they're needed for. So operating expenses are absolutely fine, but explain why they're critical for your organization. Why is that specific amount being requested, and what is it for? Does this help with a match from another funder or another donor, or what need is this kind of helping with and addressing? We did include more drop downs in this application. So there's quite a few narrative sections, but as well as drop downs to really help us kind of streamline the application and avoid any vague answers. But please, as you're doing that, I know that I can move through applications kind of quick, and I'll select a drop down, and it might not necessarily be exactly what I intended to hit. So just please review before you submit, because I know that errors happen, and we want to make sure that you guys are, again, able to put forth kind of that top application. And then kind of finally, we have a question in the application regarding the nonprofit life cycle. So we will ask you kind of where you feel like your program is at in the nonprofit life cycle. Is it in a startup phase? Or where does it exactly look like? We do have a link to the nonprofit life cycle map in the application. Feel free to use that to kind of assess where your program might fall. But this just helps us understand how to review and consider your application in context. This isn't a piece that's necessarily scored, but it helps us see there's a difference between a program that is very well established compared to a program that is newer and kind of just getting off the ground. So we might look at that with a different lens and engage volunteers in a different way. But again, this is not necessarily a scored piece of the application. So answer this honestly with where you think you're at in that life cycle. So as I switch over to Wise Hive here, I'm going to pause and see if the team has any questions they want to point out from the chat, or anything they want to add that I may not have covered.
Nope, all good in the chat.
All right, I'm going to keep rocking then, everyone. So on the 8th at 8 a.m., the Wise Hive portal will open for you to be able to start working on your application. So this will be the page that you look at, or that you will first see when you log into that the website. You'll be able to see here the link to your profile. Feel free to go in at any time and edit this profile. So if primary contacts have changed or other information has changed since you first created this profile, please go in and update it, because there will be some sections from the profile that will automatically pull into the application, so you don't have to duplicate your work, but we want to make sure that that information is accurate for you. So again, feel free to update that. You'll see here that you will have a box for each program that you have been invited to apply for. So on here, I just have the one test program. If you are an organization that has multiple programs that you've been invited to apply for, you'll have multiple application intake boxes. So what you will do is, when you're ready to start for your program, you will just click on that application intake button. It does take a minute. There we go. And you'll be taken to this page. I think a key thing to note at the top is it will tell you exactly how many days are remaining for you to be able to submit your application. So please feel free to pay attention to this. And then it will also allow you to access your letter of intent down here. So you're able to view it. If there's anything you want to specifically pull from there for your application, you'll be able to do that here. So you'll have access to that. So as we get into your application, you'll just open it from here. You can save this at any time. So if you're working on it one day and need to come back to it a few days later, that's absolutely fine. Just please remember to save it. So what I want to encourage everyone to really do is use that application guide that was sent out in these emails. If you need us to resend it, we absolutely will. We don't have this publicly posted. It's for all of you to use as you're creating that application. So the application guide, it is about 15 pages. Those first 3 pages really cover United Way's mission, the process, what eligibility looks like, other important dates in our investment policies and approach. Once you get past those 3 pages, it really gets into every section of the application. So I think first starting off on the financial review section, we'll go over this financial section and then I'll pause to see if there's any questions from here. One thing that you'll want to know is the financial review's purpose is really to verify the funds invested in our community are reaching nonprofit organizations that are fiscally and socially responsible. So the financial risk assessment section includes 4 calculations that you'll be able to see up here that are based on information provided from your organization's 990. So as you're filling this section out, utilize your 990 to do so. And then I'll go in and show you that each of the ratios will auto-calculate in WiseHive as you input your information. So you'll pull out your 990 and you'll very clearly kind of see here, we will say line 12, total revenue. So you'll go to line 12 of your 990 and fill in the information from there. Same down here, line 25, compare it to line 25 of your 990 and fill it in from here. I went in and just filled in just some random numbers in this section to show you how it does auto-calculate for you right here. So you'll see that right here, it says sum of line 1 and line 2. If I changed line 2 to 7, it would then auto-calculate to 12 for me. So you shouldn't necessarily have to do any math in this section, but we do have the 4 calculations here that will auto-calculate for you as you fill out this section. So we'll be looking at kind of a summary, a statement of functional expenses, a balance sheet, and then kind of really getting into that risk assessment from there. So as it goes through and it calculates for you, you'll see that because I didn't necessarily fill out sections, my short-term cash flow calculated as infinity. If your short-term cash flow is less than 1, you'll be asked to explain in this section. So in any sections for short-term cash flow, long-term cash flow, overhead, and months in reserve, which will all again auto-calculate from what you filled in above. When the ratios are not met here, your organization should provide an explanation. So acceptable responses can explain contextual factors that might affect the ratios and efforts to mitigate the specific financial risk. So because you might not meet a ratio does not necessarily mean that you won't be approved for funding, but we do need a clear explanation as to what is being done to mitigate that financial risk. And when ratios are met, so say your short-term cash flow is more than 1, please just fill in NA, as that would not be applicable to you. So I will pause here really quick because I know the organizational financial section is a little bit probably like the biggest, I think, portion of the application. So just want to see if there's any questions from chat, anything anyone wants to ask, or anything from the United Way team. Okay. All right then. So we'll jump into the program budget section. For those of you that have applied for funding before, we do have kind of a new step in this program budget section that I hope will be helpful to you. We have offered the opportunity that if you have your own program level budget, instead of kind of filling in our own section here, you can just select it, upload it, and all of this other information below it will disappear. So if you've got that program level budget, feel free to just upload it. You will want to make sure that if you are uploading this budget, that this includes any major revenue and expense categories, assumptions, and other relevant information. And again, if you don't have your own program level budget, all of this information in the table below is fillable, and will auto-calculate for you in terms of revenue, total expenses, surplus, or deficit. If you do upload a program level budget and it doesn't necessarily have all of the information that we might need, again, we'll reach out to you. It could be that we ask you to go back and fill this in. So please, if doing so, try to make sure that it at least covers these specific areas. I think the only other thing that I want to cover in this section is we'll get down to kind of that program budget narrative. So this is where you'll fill in your amount requested. This should be the same as what you requested in your letter of intent. You can't ask, for more in funding at this point. So this should match the letter of intent. How the majority of United Way dollars will be used. As you can see here, we've got the general program operating, specific program salary, and a narrative box to really detail out exactly how those funds will be used. So I think here, again, really making sure that acceptable responses provide a compelling purpose for United Way investment. So we very much understand the value of flexible program funding. So again, if you're seeking operating support for the specific program, providing a rationale for the amount requested and an understanding of the value of general operating funds for the program should be provided. So just really providing as much detail as possible in this section so that volunteers can really see how the dollars will be used and where they'll be going. So that is everything for the financial side of things. I'll pause one more time here for questions because the rest of this I think will fly through pretty quickly.
We do have one question. Heather would like to know what they can use if they do not have a 990.
I might kick that to Lauren. Yeah.
Yeah. So a 990 is required for most all nonprofit organizations. There are a few exceptions to that. If your organization is one of those exceptions, you'll want to use your audit or your board approved financial statements to complete the 990 section. And then it'll ask, and Meg will get to this point in the attachments, it'll ask you to upload your 990. And so you'll want to, in that upload, attach a document, a letter or some sort of a Word document that explains why you don't have a 990, just to allow us to understand why you're not completing that portion of the application. And I see, Heather, like churches are one of the exceptions to that 990 rule. So that makes sense. Just if you can kind of explain that in an upload and then use your audit to complete the 990 section for that financial area that Meg went over, that should be sufficient. And our finance team can reach out if there's any questions or concerns there.
Right. Thank you, Lauren. Go ahead.
There's one other question. Okay, Tiffany answered it. Just so you guys can see in chat, they asked if Teresa asked if a financial review is okay instead of an audit. If it's less than $500,000, then the financial review is acceptable. And Tiffany responded, if you're over $500,000 and you do not have an audit, you'll want to, again, attach the financial review and or board approved financial statements with an explanation of why you don't have an audit, again, because our finance team will look at that as well as the volunteers. But Tiffany answered that in chat. I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. There's some good activity happening in chat. So I appreciate you checking in with Tiffany and I, Meg.
Absolutely. All right. So yeah, jumping into the program application. As you'll see here, some of these specific organization questions pulled directly from my profile. So again, making sure that profile is up to date so that way this information is updated and accurate. We have added a couple of different questions from previous applications. If you've applied for funding before, knowing how many individuals are employed with your organization, as well as, again, that question about where your organization program is at in your nonprofit life cycle, since these are program applications. And we understand that if you're a program applying for multiple programs, each program might be at a different stage. And this is really, again, to help us look contextually at where your program might be at. So again, these are sections that are not scored, but really helps us get a full understanding. Again, right here, you'll be able to click to view the nonprofit lifecycle. So if you have questions about maybe where that might fall, and you'll see that your options are here. So startup, growth, sustain, renew, etc. And then here, we're just kind of curious and wondering, and I think this will really speak to volunteers, how you engage and include the voices of the populations you serve. So please select here any and all activities that would apply. So I think then jumping into those program questions, you'll fill in your program name. Again, you'll see here the link to our strategy matrix that details out those primary funding areas, and then the metrics that are required to be reported out on. So you'll be able to select a primary focus and then a secondary focus. And this really gets down to, you know, is this a shelter programming or out of school time, or what does that look like? And then your secondary focus as well. So again, if funded, you are responsible for reporting against the metrics assigned to that category. So as selecting this, just make sure it aligns. So I think getting down to here, again, kind of a typical standard application. You'll see what's available for word count. It will calculate for you. So I can put in my name and it will say that I've typed 1 word. So please, again, use that as you're going through. And I think another piece that I just want to target on is here when we're talking about our population served and geographic distribution. These sections do not need to add up to be total to 100%. We're really just trying to get a snapshot of where the, you know, majority of your services are going in terms of populations and geographic distribution. So don't feel like you need to make it add up to 100% in this category. We're just really trying to get an idea for both populations served and that geographic distribution. And I think really the last piece in terms of program impact questions that I want to highlight on is really describing that specific improved circumstance or knowledge gain. So I think here in this section, what you really want to focus on for an acceptable response will be defining what that improved circumstance or knowledge gain means within the context of your program. So how do you know that a client has experienced improved circumstances based on their participation in your program? What have they learned or what have they changed? The change in circumstance, again, should be measured and is not a function of participation in the program or receiving services. So really detailing that out here. And then we'll ask you kind of what type of evaluation tool is used to assess program progress or success. We've created a drop down here. If none of these fit in for your program, you can select other. Just be prepared to describe that here in that narrative section. So that is everything in terms of kind of like the meat of the application. I do down here, we have our attachment section. So you'll see that we ask if your organization has a revenue of over 500,000. So if that answer is yes, we require an audit. If that answer is no, board approved financial statements are required. I know we've also had the conversation. There are some organizations that do have that revenue over 500,000 that don't have an audit. So again, we would need board approved financials for that, and then just expect us to likely be reaching out. So we will ask you to submit your audit or board approved financial statement, your recent 990, and your current board of directors. So these are all of the required attachments. We have optional attachments that I really want to encourage you to utilize, because we understand that both ourselves and volunteers can only get so much of your program out of an application. So if you have videos or a brochure or an annual report or anything else that you might want to include in here, please feel free to do so. The question marks next to this will tell you like the file size that's allowed. I think all of these are at that 1,000 megabytes, and any type of file is allowed. So please, again, anything else that really details out your program and really helps capture what you're doing, feel free to add in here. It's not required, but I want to encourage you to do so. And then once you are finished, you'll agree and sign, and then you'll mark it as complete. Again, same as the letter of intent. When you mark it as complete, that does not mean that this is submitted. You'll be taken back to the main page, and if it's marked as complete, the submit button will green up. So when you're ready to submit, just green that button up and you'll be good to go and submit it. So I will just add the last couple pages of that application guide will just kind of walk you through the benefits of United Way partnership, and those requirements as it relates to reporting and what that ongoing partnership might look like if awarded funding. So I'll kind of pause for a last time here to see if there's questions over what we just walked through before we kind of go into what happens after applications are submitted. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So if there's questions from the chat or anything the team wants to cover. Okay, you guys are making my morning pretty easy. I appreciate that. So yeah, really next steps are, those applications will open on the 8th. You'll be able to log in and see that. They are due on the 31st by 5. We will not accept late applications. Once they are in, they are in. So we won't be kind of going back for corrections or anything like that. So please make sure that you're reviewing. Use us as a resource as you're completing that application. If you want us to review anything, we just ask that it's to us about a week before the application's actually due so we can provide you with kind of thoughtful and thorough feedback. But we're happy to be a resource there. To kind of look out at the next 5 or so months after applications are submitted, because we know this is a long process. From there, we'll be doing our staff and volunteer reviews. Volunteer meetings, once they review the applications, will take place probably end of April, beginning of May, and there'll be about a 2-week period in there where if they have questions for you, we'll be sending you emails asking you maybe some of those volunteer questions that we might not have thought of. So we'll send out kind of those bulk emails along the way to let you know where we're at in the process. So that way you're not kind of wondering over these few months, where is my application at, what's happening? So we'll update you, but I would say just, again, we'll have about a 2-week period for clarification questions from volunteers. So we'll just want to make sure that we're being responsive during that time to any of those questions, so that way they can make informed decisions for funding. So they'll wrap up those meetings in May. We'll provide kind of their recommendations to the board in June. And then the goal is to get those award and funding decisions out by mid-June. So that is what we're kind of looking at. I think that's everything we have for you today. Again, if you want a copy of the recording of the session, just reach out, or a copy of the PowerPoint slides. Again, reach out. Don't hesitate to ask for those. But yeah, that's really it. We'll hang on for questions for about the next, 3 to 5 minutes or so. But yeah, otherwise, I hope everybody has a good day. Thanks for joining us this first week after the new year. I'm sure this is exactly, everybody loves jumping into an application right away in the new year. So we appreciate you guys taking the time.